During the Vietnam War, a platoon of American soldiers is sent on a dangerous reconnaissance mission deep into enemy-controlled jungle territory. As they navigate the treacherous terrain, facing relentless ambushes and the ever-present fear of the unknown, they must rely on their training, instincts, and brotherhood to survive. With time running out and an evacuation uncertain, the soldiers make their final stand against overwhelming odds, proving that courage and sacrifice define the true spirit of a soldier. The thick jungle canopy stretched endlessly above, casting shadows over the mud-soaked ground as Sergeant James Jim Walker motioned for his men to move forward. The heat was oppressive, the air thick with humidity, and every step through the dense undergrowth felt like a struggle. It had been 3 days since their platoon had been dropped deep into enemy territory for a reconnaissance mission. 3 days of silence, tension, and the creeping feeling of being watched. Private Daniels wiped the sweat from his brow. "Sarge, you sure about this route? Feels like we're walking into a trap." Jim adjusted his grip on his M16 rifle. "Everything in this damn jungle feels like a trap, Private. Keep moving." The team pressed on, their senses sharpened by the eerie stillness. The jungle, usually alive with the sounds of insects and birds, had fallen silent, a warning sign every soldier knew too well. Then, in an instant, the world erupted in chaos. Gunfire cracked through the trees, and the platoon hit the ground as bullets tore through the foliage. The Viet Cong had been waiting for them. Tracer rounds streaked the air as Jim barked orders, his men scrambling for cover behind fallen logs and thick tree trunks. "Return fire. Suppress their position," he shouted over the roar of battle. Corporal Mitchell, the squad's machine gunner, set up his M60 and unleashed a stream of lead toward the enemy's position. The jungle lit up with muzzle flashes as the soldiers fought back, trying to break the ambush. Private Harris, the platoon's radio operator, frantically tried to call for air support. "Eagle 1, this is Bravo Company. We are under heavy fire. Request immediate extraction." His voice was barely audible over the gunfire. The response crackled through the radio. "Negative. Bravo Company. LZ is too hot. Hold your position. We'll get to you when we can." Jim cursed under his breath. They were on their own. The struggle for survival. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity before the enemy fire began to die down. The Viet Cong had withdrawn into the jungle, disappearing like ghosts. But the cost had been heavy. 3 men lay dead, and several others were wounded. Jim checked on Private Harris, who had taken a bullet to the shoulder. "You'll make it, kid. Just hold on." Harris winced, nodding. "We need to get out of here, Sarge. They'll be back." Jim knew he was right. They couldn't stay here. The platoon needed to move, but with wounded men slowing them down and the enemy lurking in the shadows, every decision felt like a gamble. "We head west, toward the river," he decided. "If we can get to higher ground, we'll have a better chance of signaling for evac." With their wounded in makeshift stretchers, the soldiers pressed on. Every step was a battle against exhaustion, hunger, and fear. The jungle seemed to close in around them, the unseen enemy always just out of sight. Jim kept his eyes moving, scanning the trees, expecting another ambush at any moment. The enemy was cunning, and they wouldn't give up the hunt so easily. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on him. Every decision he made meant life or death for his men. They moved as silently as possible, each soldier hyper-aware of their surroundings. The jungle was a living thing, filled with dangers beyond just the enemy. Poisonous snakes, deadly insects, and thick vegetation made every step treacherous. Jim wiped the sweat from his forehead and gritted his teeth. They had to make it. They had no choice. The final stand. By nightfall, the platoon reached a rocky outcrop overlooking a murky river. Jim ordered his men to set up a defensive perimeter. They were exposed here, but it was their best chance for an extraction. The silence of the jungle was shattered once more as the enemy attacked. This time, they came in greater numbers. Mortar rounds exploded nearby, shaking the ground. The soldiers fought desperately, their rifles blazing in the darkness. Jim took cover behind a fallen tree, firing at the advancing enemy. He saw Corporal Mitchell cut down mid-scream, his machine gun falling silent. "We can't hold much longer, Sarge," Private Daniels yelled, reloading his rifle with shaking hands. Jim knew they were out of options. "Fix bayonets. We make our stand here." Just as they prepared for the worst, the roar of helicopter blades cut through the night. Flares lit up the sky as gunships unleashed a barrage of fire on the enemy positions. The cavalry had arrived. With renewed hope, the soldiers fought back, pushing the enemy into retreat. The helicopters hovered above, ropes dropping for extraction. One by one, the surviving soldiers were pulled to safety. Jim was the last to climb aboard, his body aching, his heart heavy with the loss of his men. As the jungle disappeared beneath them, he closed his eyes, knowing that their sacrifice had not been in vain. The soldiers sat in silence during the flight back to base, their bodies battered, their spirits weary. The war was far from over, and they knew that soon they would be sent back into the fray. But for now, they had survived. For now, they had lived to fight another day. Aftermath. Back at base, Jim stood before the names of his fallen brothers, etched into a simple wooden plaque. He would never forget their bravery, their sacrifice. The war would go on, but their echoes of valor would live forever. As the sun set over the base, Jim made a silent promise to himself. He would fight on, not for glory, but for the men who had given everything. Because in war, it was not about the battles won. It was about the ones who never made it home. He clenched his fists, staring out at the horizon, knowing that someday his own name might be etched alongside theirs. But until that day came, he would keep fighting for the ones who had no choice but to sacrifice everything.